right, good afternoon. As I like to start things on time, I just want to welcome everybody to our webinar. First, I want to thank some folks in the background. I want to thank the board president of NJMMA, Mr. Ray Cody, along with the NJMMA board, Michael Pellicier, hopefully I'm saying that right, Michael, Harriet Fencer-Good, and Tom Kenny for all their work in the background, but most importantly, our three speakers here today. So just to make sure you're on the right plane, the webinar today is affordable housing from compliance to community asset. We have three speakers today, which I'll introduce all three now, and then we'll go through their bios as introduce them when they're speaking. But Tom Toronto from Bergen County United Way, president there. Frank Piazza, Piazza and Associates, Frank is president, and Joseph Portelli of RPM Development, the group vice president of development. So let's talk a little bit about Tom's topic here on affordable supportive housing, the hidden jewel. Tom is a Bergen County United Way president, has 39 years of experience working for local United Ways in Bergen, Burlington, and Hudson counties in New Jersey. Tom is a board member of the NJ211 partnership, driving implementation of the 211 helpline on behalf of New Jersey's local United Ways and New Jersey state government. Also part of the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey and the Suez North American Foundation. Tom has been active in his local community, having served as a member of the Linonia governing body and the library board and the chair of the town's planning board. So Tom, thank you for being part of this today. And Tom will have 20 minutes, and just for all three speakers, I'll keep you to that 20 minutes just so we can keep on time and leave enough questions and answers at the end. And just for the folks on the phone, we're going to wait till all the presenters are completed, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions in the end. So Tom, thank you.
Thank you, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to join with you. And what's coming up on the screen is something we call our project tracker. And though we are Bergen County's United Way, I wanted to give everyone a sense that we develop really throughout northern New Jersey. I would say exit 9 and north, although as you can see, we do have some projects that we are working on in Monmouth County. So the title of my presentation is Affordable Supportive Housing, Hidden Jewel. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are aware of supportive housing. Supportive housing is affordable housing meant to serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, MS. There's about 162 or more different diagnoses that are recognized by the state of New Jersey as being an intellectual or developmental disability. And there's also, of course, the mental health community that provides supportive housing. We tend to specialize as an affordable housing developer in supportive housing. We have a particular passion and inspiration for that style of housing, and particularly for folks with intellectual and developmental disability. And we've completed a broad range of projects, supportive housing projects across the state. The reason I call supportive housing a hidden jewel is that I think often when folks think of supportive housing, they think of group homes, and we've certainly built a fair number of group homes, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, and more. And those are projects that serve folks who require supervision or service on a 24/7 basis. And there's certainly a deep need in the state of New Jersey for that style of housing. But one of the things that we've been building quite a bit of is apartment style living that is also considered supportive housing for a population of folks who don't require 24/7 care and often have jobs and commute and work in the local community, and sometimes are overlooked as a population that can be served with affordable housing. There's sometimes just a tendency to think of the 4-bedroom group home, and that is the extent of the supportive housing portfolio. But we've managed in the last several years to build a considerable number of small apartment buildings. And in some cases, we have mixed populations. So we've checked the boxes, if you will, for municipalities in terms of senior housing, supportive housing, veterans housing in some cases, and even family housing. So I wanted to suggest to the group that you might want to consider a fuller perspective on supportive housing and perhaps engage with local developers. And I think the benefits of supportive housing, of course, are if your current inventory of housing is, of supportive housing, that is under that 25% threshold, if you will, of your overall affordable housing inventory, then you would be eligible for a bonus for production of supportive housing. And that bonus is tied to the bedroom, not the unit. So in an example of a 4-bedroom group home, if you do not have much or any other supportive housing in your community, that 4-bedroom group home is worth 8 affordable housing credits. And the same is true of the apartments that I spoke of, what we would call the independent living supportive housing. So I would suggest to you that supportive housing, sometimes not as well represented in given communities, particularly if you've been working with market rate developers who may be doing inclusionary projects. Supportive housing is often not considered, the population may not be considered as an inclusionary component because the population is not as well known to the market rate developer. But certainly not one that should be overlooked. One of the other benefits of supportive housing when thinking about your affordable housing mix is, and I'm speaking now from the landlord perspective, which is that the state provides a great deal of support to individuals to live in those independent living settings by providing housing vouchers through something called the Supportive Housing Connection. I'm actually speaking to you right now from a conference room in a project we've completed in Forum Park, 102 bedrooms of supportive housing, a 4-bedroom group home, 36 2-bedroom apartments, and 26 1-bedroom apartments that are distributed. Those apartments are distributed in 7 different buildings across an 8-acre site that is part of the green at Forum Park, right on Park Avenue, if you're familiar with the area. All of the apartments that we have rented thus far, and all the 1-bedrooms have been rented, and the 2-bedroom apartments, we're in the process of, we're about halfway through the rental. Those take a little bit longer because we're making roommate matches. All of those apartments, tenants or the residents have received vouchers upon the lease being signed with the Supportive Housing Connection. So that allows the project, of course, to have very, very positive cash flow. And while the state's Housing Mortgage Finance Agency continues to support through underwriting supportive housing projects, of course, when you get into larger multifamily, if you will, style independent living projects, sometimes debt needs to be taken on in order to complete those projects. And certainly having the availability of vouchers makes that underwriting component much more available. So some of the projects that we're working on, and as we're kind of going through our housing project tracker, and there you see a picture of Forum Park. It actually looks better in the flesh. There's a 5-bedroom group home in Fort Lee that we were just CO'd, our second project in Fort Lee. One of the things that, and if we scroll up a little bit, one of the things that you'll see, and if you can just scroll up a little bit, Michael, to Harrington Park, or scroll down, I guess. Harrington Park is next one up after Fort Lee. Harrington Park was a win-win-win. We took over a site on a corner in Harrington Park, a small suburban community in Bergen County, a real eyesore, an abandoned gas station. That was right on the main drag, Schmallenberg Avenue in Harrington Park. We were able to clean that site up, and we built, and here's an example of mixing populations, and we've just completed and just got our TCO and expect to get our CO next week, a 4-bedroom group home, basically a 4-bedroom apartment on the ground floor, an independent living, a 1-bedroom apartment next to it, and then above, a 2-story project. Above is a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 1-bedroom affordable family apartment. So a mix of family and supportive housing. And then behind the site, not visible in this elevation, are some market rate townhouses that are helping to subsidize the construction of the affordable, supportive, and family rentals. So taking a eyesore in town and turning it into a very attractive project. And as you may be able to see from these elevations, we built to a very high standard. Hardy board, Anderson windows, stonework. We really work to make sure that the projects that we build fit the aesthetic of the community that we're building in. We do that because certainly the population in the community deserves it. The population that we serve deserves it. And as the owner of a project over the long term, we like to build with those durable materials because while you may spend a bit more on the front end, it saves you in the long term because they're so much more durable. So looking for a site in your town that might be an eyesore, that could stand to be redeveloped. I would also suggest that something in a transition zone, between commercial and residential, that could be something that's attractive. We have additionally recently completed a project in Montvale where we took over a disused elementary school. And we converted that building into 10 units of affordable senior housing. Really a spectacular project, just really wonderful units, high ceilings, great windows. Interestingly enough, 2 of the tenants in that senior project actually went to elementary school in that building in their youth. And then next door to the senior project, we were able to build a 4-bedroom group home. And it's very interesting to see the dynamic and mix between the seniors and folks with in the supportive housing project, how they connect well, and in some cases become sort of, if you will, foster grandparents on some level. And then the project below in Mahwah, which we're just completing the 3rd phase. We built a group home, we built 4 independent living apartments, and now we're completing and expect to get our CO March 1, a 13-unit senior housing project. Again, mixing populations in in one site. So I think the benefit of supportive housing, aside from the incentives that are built into COA for the production of supportive housing, is the added aspect that it's a real opportunity for you to serve a very local constituency. What we have found in all the projects that we have done, to use a planner's term, we pull applicants from a very tight drive shed. The parents and the guardians of folks, young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, don't like to be distant or too distant from their adult son or daughter. As a landlord, we do not want to see folks be far away from their local area networks of support. So as a consequence, I can tell you that in all of the supportive housing projects that we have built, both group homes and independent living projects, we have residents from the very town that we are building in who are part of that applicant pool and today live in those units that we have built. Not exclusively, of course, but the ability to serve a very local constituency. And I'm sure that it's certainly not uncommon for us these days to not be before a governing body or a planning board where there isn't at least one member who does not have a personal experience, either as a parent, a guardian, a sibling, or a relative of someone with an intellectual and developmental disability. So that also speaks to the acceptance that our projects have received. We have, I guess you could say it's a bit of a referral business. As you can see from the attractiveness of projects that we've built, that they in effect kind of become our sales brochure. So I'm sitting here in Forum Park in a project that was recently completed, and we're working as an example on a project in East Hanover, the neighboring community, based on the relationships and the quality of what we have built here, which became apparent to the folks in East Hanover and who are seeking to fulfill an affordable obligation. So the ability to replicate our model, to help to demystify, if you will, all the stuff that surrounds affordable housing, to be able to leverage resources, whether it's the utilization of your municipal housing trust fund, utilization of perhaps existing municipal properties, to working with the Housing Mortgage Finance Agency for underwriting, the Federal Home Loan Bank, At the county level, depending upon the size of the community development block grant program and the home funding, we find a way to build a capital stack. And as I mentioned earlier, we, in some cases, take on a bit of leverage in order to fill the gap and complete the project. So my sense is that there is still a great deal of opportunity within particular municipalities to address the supportive housing population. I can tell you that the supply, and we've certainly done our part, as has RPM and other developers in the state of New Jersey, to increase that supply, that the demand is still significant. We're barely scratching the surface. And when one looks at some of the demographics, the age of individuals coming to the threshold of 21, the post-21 population in the state of New Jersey is expected to grow significantly. So I would suggest to you all that supportive housing is and particularly the independent living aspect of supportive housing, as not everyone is eligible or requires group home care, is certainly worth exploring, and certainly worth exploring with a creative eye. And lastly, in terms of possibilities, I can tell you we're working on a project in Ridgewood on the second story, a top of the shops project, where we've taken a long-term lease. We're renovating about 13,000 square feet. We are in the process of building two group homes and also 6 independent living apartments in the downtown of Ridgewood, which means access to amenities, transportation, employment opportunities, and in addition, also the ability of support staff to utilize public transportation to get to their jobs. And there's a picture of that mansard roof is where all of our space is. This is a former department store, Seal Fond's department store in downtown Ridgewood. So I just wanted to, just to sum up, to give everyone a sense of what the world of the possible is, to expand a little bit, perhaps, your understanding of supportive housing beyond just the group home model, to consider independent living, and to consider the possibility of mixing populations in order to fulfill your affordable housing obligations. So with that, Anthony, I think I'll stop and turn the podium over to you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it, and especially right on time as well. So thank you. And just to confirm what Tom has said, we've had a lot of success here in Hillsborough with supportive housing. And to Tom's point, it was a lot of local families that were very happy with obviously the mayor of the township in making that housing available, because they didn't want to be far from their loved ones. So it really has worked out well. The community's been supportive, and also the folks in that community as well. And the wait list was crazy. We're looking at building our next one as well. So thank you for that, Tom. Next up will be Frank Piazza of Piazza and Associates. As I mentioned before, he's a president of Piazza and Associates. His topic is Beyond the Bare Minimum, Creating a Community Asset. And Frank, again, is the founder and president of Piazza Associates, has been dedicated to the administration and compliance of affordable housing for municipalities, not-for-profit, and for-profit developers for more than 25 years. Frank entered the affordable housing arena in 1991 by directing a successful effort to develop 126 low and moderate income apartments in Plainsboro, New Jersey, for a local not-for-profit corporation. In 1994, he established Piazza and Associates, which has since become one of the largest and most experienced firms in New Jersey, specializing in the independent monitoring of affordable housing. Currently, Piazza and Associates serves as the administrative agent in a wide variety of new and existing low and moderate income housing programs in about 80 municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey. In addition to their work in affordable housing sector, Piazza and Associates manages a select number of condominium and homeowners associations in the Princeton area. So a lot of experience. Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that working? No?
Yep, you're up.
You can see my screen. Okay.
Yep, your screen's up in your slides.
Thank you. So I wanted to start this brief discussion with where I started out in affordable housing in the early 90s. And that's with the Windhurst at Plainsboro, 100% affordable low-income housing tax credit property that we developed through the nonprofit, Plainsboro Nonprofit Housing Corporation. I started working there exactly 30 years ago, I guess. They are still my client after all these years. And the reason that I wanted to share this with you is because I think that what I termed my little discussion to be creating a community asset. I didn't come with a picture of a brand new property, but one that's literally more than 25 years old now. And I did that for a reason. When this was first being thought of and planned in Plainsboro, one of the first things that they told me was this was because I came in I was hired after a lot of the initial planning, like the piece of property, et cetera, was done. And they said, well, listen, Frank, this is the deal here. We want this to be the nicest, most well-maintained property forever, and we're putting it right in the middle of town. And so it is. It's where there were a lot of folks back then trying to push this 100% affordable property off to the edges of the municipality. For a whole variety of reasons, Plainsboro wanted it out front and wanted to be proud of it. And I hope that I've helped do that over these many years, because it's been a great property and it continues to be really well maintained and well managed. And the reason that this is important for my whole outlook on affordable housing is after all of these years and experience with a variety of different properties in a variety of different towns, a couple of life's lessons that maybe I share with you so that if you have any opportunity to put your thumb on the scale this way or that way with your affordable housing, my idea would be to embrace it and make the most out of it instead of just filling the numbers and filling the obligation. So one of the things that I wanted to start with here is to really understand the difference between rental housing and purchase housing. I think that you see mostly rental being built today for a lot of market reasons, I guess. But in my mind, they're so very different in terms of affordable opportunity. Very, very different, not only immediately, but in 20, 30 years out, because now we're looking at these properties that are 25 years old, 30 years old, both rental properties throughout the state and for sale properties. And when you talk about rent or buy, one of the first things you want to do is say, how are you going to manage this over time? Manage housing conditions over time. You have repairs, which are ongoing. Deferred maintenance, which are those kinds of things when you own a house, you know, you're going to have to paint every few years, et cetera. And long-term reserve funding for when it's time to replace the windows that even in a condominium are usually the responsibility of the homeowner, or your HVAC system needs to be replaced. So in all of these, when we look at the difference between renting and buying, we know that over time, landlords with significant funding, whether it be through equity funding, through the low-income housing tax credit program, or the funding, the subsidy that comes from the market units in an inclusionary development, 99.9% of the time, the landlords, especially larger landlords, have the resources to maintain the property over many years, to revitalize the property, to refurbish the property and the units when it needs to happen. And so you'll see apartment communities, well maintained in terms of the exterior, and a lot of times even in a condominium complex where there's ownership units, the landscaping is taken care of. But when you look close at the units, many, many times on the sale side, there are some significant problems. There are problems with the condition of the unit over time because folks don't have the funding or are not motivated to utilize the funding because of the finances of it to reinvest in the property. So manage housing conditions over time is really important. And also, and this is all about making this an asset for your communities. That's really kind of what I'm talking about. Managing housing costs over time. This is another thing. For affordable housing to be really good affordable housing, it not only has to be well maintained, but it has to continue to remain affordable. And that's really important. On a rental complex, and you have your increase, your maximum allowed increase based on the consumer price index each month. And on a sales side, you're allowed to add on the resale just the amount of median income increase. But to manage housing costs, it's not only the rental rate, which goes up a little bit each year, not only the what you're going to get in terms of equity at the end of the day, but it's the cost of living there, the cost, your housing costs over time. So your rental variables really are your utilities. The rent is controlled in a sense, but your utilities, if they go up significantly or out of proportion with inflation, you have that exposure. But on a sale unit, if you own the unit, you have utility exposure because you're paying your own utilities. You also have property tax exposure. No offense to folks who are running the property tax operations. And your HOA fees. How often do you hear complaints from people who are having a hard time with the HOA fee that's gone up 10% or 15% or 20% because they're unregulated? And the market folks oftentimes are able to pay those kinds of increases, but the affordable homeowner or the affordable homeowner are not likely to have that kind of extra cash flow, at least in the first few years of occupying or owning a unit. And then there's manage the program over time. And by that, we're administrative agents, right? So our job is to make sure that all of these units remain in compliance. We not only do the affirmative marketing, we do the quote unquote lotteries or random selections. We do all of that. We do certify all of the income for the tenants or the owners, but we also have to enforce the regulations. And the most difficult ones clearly to enforce in terms of occupancy, residency enforcement are the ones for sale units. And so for those reasons, I have we do the work for all the different units, and I typically don't get involved in the politics of it all, but I know that the rental units tend over time to be more well maintained, and they remain affordable, I think, where it's kind of catchers catch can on ownership units. So that's one really important aspect of it. Then I have target affordability, and I'm using as an example. You can do target affordability in all different respects, but senior units or also affordable units for older persons. Now, there are only two choices under federal law that a developer can choose for the occupancy of the units. It can be 55 plus, where at least one member of the household is 55 or older, or 62 plus, where everybody in the household has to be 62 or over. And I bring this up only because, again, you can really reduce the ability of a property to be well maintained and affordable over a long time if, without a whole lot of good analysis, you choose to say 62 or over. Because now what you've done is you've reduced your target market tremendously, as opposed to the 52 or over. So it's, again, it's something, it's great to have housing dedicated to older folks. It's just something that a municipality going into that should be aware of the differences. And also we promote the idea that the town should be the one who is establishing the minimum age for the 55 or older. That's the minimum age for the other occupant of the unit, whether it's 19, 20, 18, or what have you. Something to get your arms around ahead of time. Again, targeting affordability. Senior units, all the seniors like 2-bedroom units. You know, one for us to sleep in and one for us to put the stuff in that we've accumulated, etc. And really nice affordable units are created that are 2-bedroom units for seniors. The problem is that they are not affordable by definition, typically to households of one person, maybe to households of 2 people. Technically, we do the schedule on 3 for a 2-bedroom unit is made affordable to 3 persons. So 2 persons have a difficult time affording it, and 1 person often cannot afford it. So I know that there are those communities out there, but these are, again, ideas, things to think about as things are, as people or developers or whomever are coming to the town and say, listen, this is what we're proposing. And obviously community amenities, including where the community is located. I consider that a bit of an amenity, and whether or not they're all geared for and accommodate seniors or older persons. Also, another way of really making the most out of your affordable housing is creating or promoting economic integration. Now, what do I mean by that? Because in essence, we think of affordable housing itself as being creating the economic integration. But when you look at the levels of affordability and the size of the units, there is really a broad swath of economic conditions that are brought to that property in terms of integrating the folks. So let me just kind of give you a little bit of an example. Under the UHAC regulations, the Uniform Housing Affordability Controls, we all know that 20%, there's a 20% max on 1-bedrooms, 30% minimum on 2 bedrooms, and a 20% minimum on 3 bedrooms. So typically, if you had 100 units, you'd have 21s, 32s, and 21s, 23s, and the rest 60 2-bedroom units, because developers typically will choose to build out that way. They'll want to build the least number of units or least number of bedrooms, and that's really how you do it. But in reality, the balance, there's 20, 40, 70%. So the balance, 30 more percent can be 2 or 3-bedroom units. Again, depending on your municipality and your, I know a lot of folks will just kind of go to that school thing, but broader than that, there's a huge demand for really quality 3-bedroom units in the state because of all of the building at 60% 2-bedroom units. It's 60% 2-bedroom units everywhere, which has created a real demand for 3-bedroom units. And also, I would like to suggest that 3 bedrooms also bring in more diversity in terms of economic diversity. And I'm going to explain that in a second. 50% of, and the very low units, now you'll have everybody who has an agreement with the court or with fair share. Now the 13% affordability for very low is in there. 50% of each unit type, 50% of the 1s, 50% of the 2s and 3s have to be low or very low. And we know that there is no rule that requires even the very low units, the ones that 13% at 30% of the median, the new ones that were part of the amended Fair Housing Act, they're not in UHAC, and there's no rule for how they should be dispersed. So again, thinking that the town is really interested in making the most of their affordable housing, they'll have an opinion as to what units should be very low. So in most cases, they'll say, well, the planning resolution might say, well, we want X number of 1s, 2s, and 3s to be very low, because that's kind of an overlay that you can put on the regulatory requirement that is otherwise found in UHAC. Now, I say economic integration, and I just want to show you this chart. This is a maximum incomes. This happens to be in Region 3, which is 100 in Somerset and Somerset, Middlesex, and 100 in counties. And if you look at this, you'll see that this is maximum income. And when I say diversity here, one person maximum for a very low, on the low end, is going to be $25,000. But 6-person maximum on the moderate end is 110,000. So instead of looking at affordable housing as all those people or that category or the non-market group, look at the diversity in this group. It's really crazy. It's a $85,000 difference between the bottom and the top end. So as we make those 1s, 2s, and 3-bedroom units, because that drives the occupancy, we're also affecting the economic integration of the municipality or of the affordable units. And so it's not something you have to do, but it's just something to look broader beyond the rules and the regulations, and to see what kind of an impact those rules and regulations have. Amenities and fees. I gotta say this before we run out of time. This is really important. Amenities and fees is probably the biggest arguments that I have with developers after they get done with the planning board. The rule of thumb is if it's mandatory for your market residents, there's no charge for affordable. And this pretty much has to do with rentals. So an example, a gym. Every market tenant has to pay $500 a year to use their pool and a gym or what have you. Landlords are not allowed to put those charges on top of the affordable rent, because it's just another way of layering rents and generating more revenue. But on the other side, if an amenity is for market is optional, then it's optional for affordable residents at the same rate. It can be at the same rate. An example is pets. If I choose to have a pet, I pay a pet fee. It's not mandatory. If I pay pet for pet fee and I'm a market person, then the affordable person pays the same thing. But there are some, and this is something that the planning board, might really want to explore. What kind of amenities, and are they going to be available to the affordable folks? But one of the biggest problems we see is parking. Parking now in many municipalities has become kind of a premium. And so there's a charge for parking for market residents. And technically speaking, if I applied the rules that we just talked about, you would be able to charge parking for all your affordable tenants, but again, making the unit less affordable. Something to think about, maybe something to address early on in the process. But if I'm paying $800 for rent, which is really a good idea, it's a good deal, I should say, but I'm paying $200 more to park my car, I'm losing out on affordability. And again, under those rules and regulations, if you allow that, there really isn't any way to regulate the fee. Once you say you can have the fee, there's no, in the rules, there are no options to regulate the fee itself, only the rent. And I did want to mention the veterans preference, in case you haven't heard. The Fair Housing Act was amended to allow for a veterans preference for up to 50%, and that's for rentals, something to consider as well. And quality of life amenities. I don't know, this is a good place to put it or not, but is the unit large enough for 2 persons per bedroom? So we have these units in one town where somebody's been, they purchased the unit. It's a small condominium. They have 4 people living in a 2-bedroom condominium. And one day an inspector decides to look at the unit and says, well, 4 people can't live here. it's too small based on our occupancy standards. So whatever the occupancy standards actually kind of vary from place to place. So whatever occupancy standard, just kind of another heads up, make sure that the unit is actually large enough for 2 persons per bedroom, because that's really the how it's supposed to be fulfilling the obligation under the Fair Housing Act. Is there a laundry? Do you have a washer and dryer in the unit? Is there a laundry down the hall? You know, unfortunately, I've seen places where the affordable units are the only units without a washer and dryer for whatever unknown reason. Not a good idea to separate those folks out for that. Even simple things like walking paths and bike racks, they don't have to be expensive amenities. And I'm sure that there are other amenities that you can think of. Most of all, when it comes to what I consider to be really important for affordable housing, I'm not sure how you deal with this technically from a municipal standpoint, but the biggest thing in terms of quality of life is responsible, respectful management. And that's whether it's management of rental units or management of sale units. I think that that's the one thing that we hear back from folks about probably all too often. And most of the time it's the smaller operations that have these issues. But it's a shame when that happens, because I think no matter how affordable anything is, if somebody really can't live there because, you know, people don't like them, or don't like the way they look, or don't like the fact that they're affordable folks, then it's a shame. It doesn't really work out well. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And I think you gave us a lot of different things to think about. So I appreciate, again, spending time with us. And we're actually ahead of schedule, so that's good, a couple minutes. So next up is Joseph Portelli, RPM Development Group Vice President of Development. And he's one of the leading developers of affordable and mixed income housing in New Jersey, RPM is. Since joining RPM in 2010, Joseph has coordinated the development of over 1,500 units of housing, representing nearly 500 million of community investment. Founded in 1986, RPM has used its experience in development, construction, leasing, and property management to build a portfolio of nearly 4,500 units across the state. Their work has included new construction on underutilized land, their adaptive reuse of industrial properties, the restoration of historic buildings, and multi-phase initiatives to increase affordable housing options in urban and suburban communities. So, Joseph.
Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone. And Frank, thanks for giving me a few extra minutes so I can build on some of your points and also highlight what my focus is going to be, which is resident-friendly and community-centered case studies. And I'll also share a little bit about our approach to design and amenities in community building. But first, a very brief commercial on RPM. As Anthony mentioned, we are a vertically integrated full-service development company. We do affordable housing and mixed income and mixed-use development, soup to nuts, from development through construction to leasing and property management. And we have worked with a range of local agencies, county agencies, state and federal agencies to build affordable housing throughout New Jersey. And our specialties are really in redevelopment and complex public-private partnerships. And we work with a range of public and private funding sources to do new construction projects, brownfield remediation, adaptive reuse, historic rehab. And another specialty of ours is energy efficiency and sustainability. Over the years, we have developed a niche for ourselves for building extra energy efficient buildings by striving for LEED Platinum certification. That's the U.S. Green Building Council leadership in energy, environmental design program. And not only do they build and make for better buildings for our residents, but they're buildings to operate and maintain over the long term. So I'm going to skip right over to a couple of our case studies. And I'm highlighting, I'm going to show a suburban one and an urban one. Both have lessons that can apply to any community. This first one is a 50-unit project on 5 acres. It's a stacked townhome style community with a range of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And I chose this one because this was the result of a very focused, intentional process that helped us deliver to the borough things that were important to them, while also touching on the regulatory and compliance things. So this was a site that was in a redevelopment area for about a decade. So there was an existing redevelopment plan, and this created the opportunity to enter into a redevelopment agreement with the borough. And what that did for them and for us was to go beyond the land use regulations and design standards in the redevelopment plan to focus on some things that were important to them and important to us, whether that was helping to manage UHAC requirements with those of the federal low-income housing tax credit program, which is our primary funding source, project design elements. I don't remember what exactly what the redevelopment plan said, but the town leadership really wanted something high quality, set a high standard to make sure that this would shine through as a community asset. So they wanted high quality exterior materials. They wanted in-unit washer and dryer for all the units, as opposed to common laundry, community building of a certain size, a certain type of parking. You could see a lot of garages. So the redevelopment plan, of course, quantified the number of parking spaces, but didn't really specify the type. But not that we had much of a choice here, because even though it was 5 acres, it was still pretty tight, especially because there was a change in grade from top to bottom of over 100 feet. So that's why we have multiple tiers of development here. And the foreground is our project. And in the background is a 62-unit single family market rate development that are selling for $1 million plus. And they all sold very, very quickly. And I mentioned that for 2 reasons. One, to address any stigma or fear that there might be about having affordable housing in proximity to or integrated among market rate development, but also the idea of setting a high standard and raising expectations for residents in the project and outside the project. So while we had a requirement to use masonry and fiber cement siding, those houses that sell for $1 million, which are quite nice both inside and out, I don't believe that they had a requirement to have fiber cement siding. They have the vinyl siding. So it's just one thing to highlight the contrast that us affordable housing developers, we can be quite successful in building something that you wouldn't even realize is affordable housing. If it's well designed and it's well managed, you won't even know that it's there. So these buildings have front and back, all with porches for each unit. And one thing that I wanted to mention about the redevelopment process and doing a redevelopment agreement, this project first received an award of tax credits in 2017. And when I say tax credits, that's the federal low-income housing tax credit program, a 9% tax credit award. Many of you may be familiar with that by now as you've worked through your settlement agreements or court orders. And at the end of 2017 came tax reform. So as we started to finance the rest of this development and move towards construction, the world became a very different place. And so recognizing that the world changes, a global pandemic is also another good example, is if you're going to go the redevelopment route, I would suggest building in a process for waivers, not major waivers, but reasonable tweaks to the project program or design in the event of something odd that might require some changes for budgeting purposes or maybe unforeseen conditions in the field. So allow a little flexibility, but don't sacrifice the overall intent. And a note about the program here, this is a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3-bedroom units, but we also serve households between 20% AMI and 80% AMI. So if you go back to that chart that Frank had, we have single people earning, $20,000 to $30,000, but we also have 3-bedroom households that earn upwards of $80,000. So to the point of integration, I think that is really important. Yes, we have low moderate income households here, but they're not concentrated at one particular income level. Okay. This next project is the urban project. This is almost a 6-acre site that has 330 units in 34 buildings, and it's mixed income. It's not, I wouldn't call it inclusionary because it's not your traditional 80-20 deal or 85%, 15% deal. It is a project that is 70% affordable and 30% market. So we've got 230 affordable units and 100 market rate units all scattered throughout. And the building that you're looking at here is the project's community building. It's an old powerhouse. And on the left side, you can see it has 2 halves. The left side is the residential half, and the right side is the community building half, common area amenity space. And I'm highlighting this because we've done something unique here in that we have partnered with the local Boys and Girls Club to open up a licensed childcare facility. So what I'm highlighting here is an opportunity to use mixed use as a built-in amenity for residents. And something like this works much better for a project of size and of scale like this, where you have room for a separate building or a larger commercial space. But by the time it opens, we're going to be serving 50 to 60 children during the school year and during the summer. So I think this is going to be something that is attractive to residents of both the market rate units and the affordable units, because how often do you get to have childcare right down the street from where you live? The next couple slides, I'm going to show some of our community rooms or community spaces. So a lot of projects have clubhouses or lounges, which are beautiful and nice and useful and attractive. But in our projects, we have an empowerment program. RPM and many of our peers have, we deliver social services and resident programming in our projects. So I'm sharing, you notice that this community space is rather, I guess it's a little bare, but that's because it's a multi-purpose space. This is in a senior building. So this room has a lot of classes for our senior residents, like Zumba and yoga and dancing. And before the coronavirus, we had a lot of in-person gatherings here. So the community space can and should be something that has the ability to be multi-purpose, to go beyond just the pool tables and the games, and something that can enrich and empower residents economically and socially. We also do medical screenings and computer lab, all kinds of services that are tailored to our residents. Here's another one. We do kitchenettes in all of our community rooms. There's a computer workstation off to the side. And this is especially if you're cramped for space, if you don't have the luxury of a standalone community building or a large lounge, a gym, having a multi-purpose community room that can do some health and wellness and after school, I think is useful. I'm sharing an interior unit, and I can't tell you if this is an affordable unit or a market rate unit, because on this particular project, we had the good fortune of a budget that allowed for finishing market rate units and affordable units at the same level. This is a mixed income project that was about half market rate, half affordable. As you could see, the kitchen really got a nice custom touch with granite countertops and backsplash and semi-custom cabinets. And again, the idea of elevating expectations, setting a standard for design is really important. It's something that we aim to do. Frank talked about building a community asset as a life affordable housing lesson, but that's how we approach every project. We want something that is going to be great for our residents and the community around us. And this might be my last slide. I think it is. But this also applies to building exteriors too. And we want to integrate economically, but also physically. And it goes back to the idea of avoiding the stigma that's sometimes attached to affordable housing. And I think you've seen it in the news recently too, in a number of communities where there have been proposals to have standalone buildings that might look a little different or a one-off. We don't believe it has to be that way. And really affordable units and market rate units these days really cost about the same amount to build. So if you can use exterior design to help set that standard, to differentiate yourself in a good way, I think that's worth doing. So that's for the RPM stuff, but some of the things that Frank touched on that I want to mention real quickly. On seniors, I would agree that 55 plus is the way to go with your age-restricted projects, mainly for that marketing reason. And 2 bedrooms in senior projects in addition to the affordability. And we recognize that grand families or adult children are a real thing. I think it's prevalent in a lot of communities. 1-bedroom units are the way to go. And on the veterans preference, I think that is really important to consider. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who wouldn't agree with that. But as you craft your plans, I would caution, or at least keep in mind that what we've encountered in the marketplace is that with the veterans, we see vets at the end of the spectrum. You've got folks who have solid jobs, maybe multiple sources of income from a pension or two, who sometimes fall out of the income range for affordable housing. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are individuals who have unfortunately fallen through the cracks, require more support services, whether it's job training or getting used to independent living again at the lower end of the income spectrum. So if you are going to put a focus on veterans, keep in mind where the local veterans resources and facilities, where's the local VA, where are the clinics, who are the organizations in your area that can help provide these services to help make for a more successful community, both for all residents and for the vets themselves.
Thank you, Joseph. And we look forward in Hillsborough to working with you on our upcoming project with RPM as well. So I wanted to thank both all three, Tom and Frank and Joseph, for spending time with us today. Before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to, for the folks who are on, just to, if there's any other training that you're looking for, please reach out to me so we can look at providing quarterly webinar series for everyone. Our hope is that we will be having our annual conference in September, and we look at providing high quality training education, as well as finding a destination that's suitable for everyone and to provide networking opportunities. So the board is working hard to try and provide a safe environment for everybody and get us back in person. So with that, if you want to raise your hand, and Michael, thanks for doing a great job behind the scenes and keeping us all up here on Zoom. Just raise your hand, and then Michael will take you off mic, and we can go from there. So any questions? Wait for the raising of the hand here. You guys did a great job though in explaining, but let's see if you have any questions here. And Michael, if you want to unmute yourself too, just in case there's anybody else trying to.
Doesn't look like anybody has their hands up, Anthony.
And they're not a shy group, though, the administrators here. So this will be the first time. You guys have done an amazing job if there's not even one question here. Are we going to make this available as far as any of the slides or anything that the team has prepared here?
The recording will be on the NJMMA website probably tomorrow.
Okay, great. That's awesome.
Nope, looks like Mr. Cody has one.
Mr. Cody, yes. President Cody, thank you. We'll have to unmute him.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Joe, could you talk a little bit about where you get the money to build the projects? I know you talked about the low-income housing tax credit, and I know that's a very competitive process. But in addition to that, could you just talk about your track record there and maybe other funding sources that towns can try to supplement their affordable housing trust funds with? That would be helpful. And thank you both to Tom and Frank. You were great. Thank you.
Short, and I didn't mean to glance over that because I could talk your ear off about that for quite some time about explaining those different funding sources. But and Tom started to highlight some of them in his presentation. But the primary vehicle for financing affordable housing for us niche affordable housing developers, the federal low-income housing tax credit. It's a federal program administered by each state's mortgage housing and finance agency. And the golden ticket, if you will, is what we call the 9% low-income housing tax credit. That provides a subsidy that can finance these days, roughly 70–75% of your development costs. And that's done on a competitive basis. The state puts out a plan called the Qualified Allocation Plan to set forth various policy objectives. And we go out and seek sites and tailor our projects to help meet those standards, in addition to having a site-specific, community-sensitive design that meets municipal objectives. But in addition to the 9%, there are some HUD programs like CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, HOME. There have been mishmash programs over the years through different stimulus programs like NSP, or that's the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which isn't around anymore. There's also the 4% low-income housing tax credit, which is it works in the same way as the 9% tax credit, but provides lower subsidy, roughly 35–40% of your development costs. There's the Federal Home Loan Bank, the Affordable Housing Program, like the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. They put forth a plan that has policy objectives of their own, whether it's income mixing or supportive housing or proximity to different services. The state has programs that come out from time to time. Some of you may be familiar with the old Balanced Housing Program, which the Murphy administration rolled out again as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is generally targeted for smaller projects these days. Tom, what am I missing? What else are you using these days?
I think you covered the waterfront, Joe.
Okay.
The only other piece I would add is that, and I'm sure you do this as well, but our own equity sometimes has to go into the job to make it work. And then as a last resort, of course, is private through the conventional financing route.
Thank you, Ray. I thought you were going to start the onslaught of questions here. So, but anyone else or from the panel here as well, anything that you may have left out, because I was making sure you guys stayed on target for 20 minutes, which you all did. Anything, any closing comments for the group? And I appreciate everybody staying on on the call as well. Okay. All right. I want to thank everybody, especially again, our three speakers for taking their time and talents, and for everybody joining here. We'll be communicating out to the group for the next webinar series, which should be in another month and a half or so. So thank you all, and have a great rest of the week. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Free time.